Hello, welcome to Privacy Chats with Rachel and John. This is a privacy podcast for privacy professionals and enthusiasts alike. I'm John, goofing things up in the beginning.
And I'm Rachel. We've only done 30 something episodes so far, so we're still getting the hang of it. We are your hosts.
We are.
What are we talking about today, John?
Okay. So this is going to be a bit of a follow-up to our last chat that we had, our last episode. And in that, we were talking about the European Union and the AI Continental Action Plan. And you did a lot of research on that for us. So that focuses on bolstering Europe's AI capabilities through major infrastructure investments. And I wanted to follow up and take a closer look at recent executive action in the United States in the AI development and adoption space, because I think it's pertinent to that discussion.
Yeah, it's a great idea, and it'll be good to see what's happening in comparison to the EU, just as a fast follow to our previous episode. And I'll note that for listeners and readers of our Substack, I will create and embed a series of diagrams to kind of summarize the timeline of the legislative acts of what we're talking about today. So keep an eye out, no matter where you're listening. It should be available to you. With that, let's dive in. What is happening at the executive level? Sorry.
And I saw those diagrams, so thanks for doing that, Rachel. That's awesome. So before we talk about, I think we have to kind of back up a little bit get into some of the background here. So if we go back to October 2023, and I guess in the AI development space, a few years is a lifetime. The Biden administration order 14110, and it was titled Safe, Secure, and Trustworthy Development and Use of Artificial Intelligence.
Yeah, let's hear about the intent of that particular executive order, John.
So I think to talk about the intent, I'd rather just read. There's a purpose section at the beginning of the executive order. So I'm just this is directly verbatim from that order. So it said that artificial intelligence holds extraordinary potential for both promise and peril. Responsible AI use has the potential to help solve urgent challenges while making our world more prosperous, productive, innovative, and secure. At the same time, irresponsible use could exacerbate societal harms such as fraud, discrimination, bias, and disinformation, replace and disempower workers, stifle competition, and pose risks to national security. I'll stop with that. I think that kind of covers.
Yeah. So how did that one intend to achieve all of those really big goals?
So I ran that executive order through ChatGPT to see what AI has to say about it, and it came back with 5 key objectives and directives.
I'm smiling because I love that you're using AI to develop content about the responsible adoption of AI, and I don't mean that like sarcastically. I'm serious.
No, I get it. And, to be clear, I'm really not opposed to AI or its development or adoption. I think it's undoubtedly going to bring huge changes to our world and how it operates. And I think most of these changes are going to be good. So I'm not a hater. But it needs to be responsible. And we'll talk about that here. So on the Biden executive order, the one that I just read that purpose section from, the first objective that AI noted from it was advancing AI safety and security. And it included kind of things that the developers of significant AI systems were to share safety test results with the federal government, which suggests that they're performing safety through tests.
Yes.
It called for the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, right down the street from where I live here in Maryland. It was to develop rigorous standards for testing AI safety and security testing, and that federal agencies were to identify and mitigate potential AI-related risks to critical infrastructure.
That all seems more than reasonable and really good ideas. What else?
Yeah. So the second objective was about protecting civil rights and privacy, our favorite topic. And it required things like that federal agencies were to assess and address the potential for AI systems to perpetuate discrimination to users. And you and I have talked about that a few times, that there's a tendency for these machine learning models to, I don't know, learn discrimination from stuff that it's learning from. Because
Yeah, yeah. Depending
yeah,
on how it's weighted, what it's trained on, right? It's
yeah,
input
right.
output
It's
system.
yeah, well, yes. That of it. So the order emphasized the importance of safeguarding privacy and civil liberties in AI applications, particularly in areas like law enforcement and housing, places where discrimination has historically been bad.
Yeah, and getting ahead a little bit here, but I can see where the new direction might be veering away from maybe some of the more anti-bias, anti-discrimination stuff, but we're gonna get there. So I'll shut it.
Yeah, we will. So yeah, stick a pin in that for a minute. I think we'll get there. The third objective was promoting innovation and competition, and it included things like encouraging the development of AI technologies that bolster economic growth and competition, investment in AI research and development, and support for small businesses and startups in the AI sector. So it was really, building business and competition.
Yeah, I'm hearing similar tones from our AI in Europe episode, and it's starting to get more into the mode of the current administration, which is interesting.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. And to be clear, this was from the Biden executive order, so it wasn't as if Biden was against building business and competition.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
for sure.
The fourth objective that was identified in that analysis was supporting workers in education, and it included things like the need to understand AI's impact on the labor market, and to develop strategies for workforce transition and upskilling. Like people's jobs will be lost. People are going to have to move to new careers.
I mean, if they haven't been already, right?
Yeah.
It'll come in waves.
Yeah, for sure. And it promoted the integration of AI related topics into educational curriculum or curricula to prepare future generations.
This is awesome. And I know how strongly you feel about education and just continuous learning. So I suspect that's your favorite part, John.
It is for sure. I am a firm believer in lifelong learning. Any initiatives that provide education, training, workforce development, they're all important, and they're always, always, always going to have my support. So yes. The final objective of the Biden executive order was enhancing government use of AI, and it included stuff like requiring agencies to adopt AI technologies responsibly to improve public services, also ensuring transparency and accountability in their use. And the order also called for development of guidelines for AI procurement and deployment within federal agencies. And we're actually going to circle back to that here in a little bit.
Nice. And thanks for providing the summary and the background on the Biden executive order on AI. But that didn't survive, did it?
It did not, nor did I think any Biden executive
Anything he
orders.
left behind.
On January 20th, most of the Biden executive orders were overturned, but on January 23rd specifically, so through 2-3 days after the inauguration, the administration issued a new executive order, and it was titled "Removing Barriers to American Leadership in Artificial Intelligence."
Yeah, I mean, aptly named for the attitude. And we touched on this a little bit when it was happening, but right, it's a good time to look back and reflect on how that came about. So tell me a little bit more about this new EO.
So that EO, since I read the purpose statement from Biden's, I figured it's only fair to read the purpose statement verbatim from the new administration executive order. So it said that the United States has long been at the forefront of artificial intelligence innovation, driven by the strength of our free markets, world-class research institutions, and entrepreneurial spirit. To maintain this leadership, we must develop AI systems that are free from ideological bias or engineered social agendas. With the right government policies, we can solidify our position as the global leader in AI and secure a brighter future for all Americans.
Putting a pin in it there. That sounds like enough.
Yeah.
We kind of
I
compared
think that's
the
enough.
same way.
There's a little bit more. I'll stop there. Yeah.
But it sounds so far that there's this focus on perhaps ideological bias and social agendas that, wasn't, from what I can remember, included really in the priorities for Biden's order. There are similar I guess like social elements, but from a different angle of bias and discrimination. Trump's order, some like didn't actually mention who in the context of the ideological bias or social agendas would be consulted to actually understand and mitigate those impacts. So a little curious
Right.
about that part.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I guess stay tuned to see where they're going to go with some of those things.
Yeah, and is it fair to
But
say that the this order rescinded Biden's executive order, just to level set with our listeners?
it did. This order rescinded the Biden executive order, the initiatives that we previously discussed. So, yeah.
But the plan isn't necessarily just to walk away from any AI oversight, right?
I don't think so. So in that executive order, there was a section 2 which established policy, and it specifically ordered. It said it is the policy of the United States to sustain and enhance America's global AI dominance in order to promote human flourishing, economic competitiveness, and national security. And then there's a section 4 that order the OMB and a couple of other agencies, like there was a few different agencies that were tasked. And it said that they were to develop and submit to the president an action plan to achieve that policy, and they were given 180 days.
So I mentioned earlier, we kind of looked at this executive order when it was being announced earlier this year, but we've just now passed the 100-day mark of the administration. So I would love to know if they're making progress on actually developing action plans against these orders.
I think that they are on April 7th, so not too long ago, which was really just 74 days after this directive. The White House announced 2 new OMB policies related to AI. One of them, Memorandum 25-21, was called Accelerating Federal Use of AI Through Innovation, Governance, and Public Trust. And the second one, Memorandum M2522, it was titled Driving Efficient Acquisition of Artificial Intelligence in Government.
Awesome. And this is a good plug to note that those diagrams I was talking about earlier at the beginning of this episode are going to come in handy starting about now, because we're bringing in a lot of the memorandums and policies and acts here. So take a look at that. And also, just for reference for listeners, the OMB is the Office of Management and Budget, and their role is to really help the president oversee and administer the federal budget and ensure agencies are operating in the direction set by that administration. All of that out of the way, I'll say it is kind of an impeccably fast turnaround. 74 days after the directive is like blink of an eye when it comes to movement. I think in a lot of government agencies, you keep me honest, I'm looking at it from an outsider's perspective.
Agreed. Although, as I was looking at the Biden executive order, there was a section in there that ordered the OMB to do what ended up in these 2 memorandums. So thinking about that after the fact, like after I was really, put this together, I realized they may already have started this. Like this might've been work that was already in progress, and the administration changed. So, I don't know. It doesn't really matter.
Keep on moving. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yes. And that's how government should run. It shouldn't be that every administration says, oh, we're going to stop everything the last guy did. And now, right.
Never get anything done.
Well, we're not. But anyway. So of those 2 memorandi, let's go with that.
I trust you.
From the OMB, the second one, which is titled Driving Efficient Acquisition of Artificial Intelligence in Government, it specifically mentions 2 acts or laws that are already on the books. And I think your graphs are going to help us to understand this a little bit better, because we're going to get a little bit deep into the weeds here. So the first of these laws was called the Advancing American AI Act. This was enacted into law in December 2022 as part of a National Defense Authorization Act. So a bill within a bill, I guess. The key provisions in this were to mandate federal agencies to do a few things. One was to develop and refine guidelines for the ethical and transparent use of artificial intelligence. Important. Assess and mitigate risks related to privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties in AI applications.
Love to hear it.
Um, yes, establish processes to ensure that AI-related contracts align with federal standards on data protection and accountability, and to maintain public inventories of AI use cases to promote transparency. And this law also directed the Department of Homeland Security to revise its AI procurement and approval procedures to address potential impacts on civil rights and liberties.
Yep. So just to recap, make sure I'm keeping up. Trump's executive orders set the OMB policies perhaps into motion, or although we're wondering if they were already set in motion, but either way, those policies refer to other legally binding acts within pre-existing mandates related to AI use in the government sector specifically. I'm following. How about that second act? I think you listed two.
Yeah, the second law that this OMB memorandum referenced was the AI and Government Act of 2020, so 2 years earlier. This was enacted as part of a Consolidated Appropriations Act, so funding, I guess. The primary goal for that act is to promote the responsible and effective use of AI across federal agencies. And some key provisions were the creation of the AI Center of Excellence within the General Services Administration. The law established this Center of Excellence within the GAO, and it was to assist federal agencies in adopting AI technologies by offering best practices, technical expertise, and guidance to enhance efficiency and public service delivery. It also tasks the OMB with issuing policies for federal agencies regarding the acquisition and application of AI, and with identifying necessary skills and competencies for AI roles within the federal workforce.
Alrighty, so we have one of the two new policies from the OMB referencing AI-related laws that were enacted in 2020 and 2022. So what did the new policy do?
Well, again, I'm going to use the technologies that are available to us. So I ran that policy, which was the M25-22 one, through ChatGPT and asked for a summary. And it came back with 3 key objectives. So the first one was promoting a competitive American AI marketplace, and there was a few parts of that. The second was safeguarding taxpayer dollars through performance tracking and risk management. And there was some, extra nuances in there for that. And the third was enhancing AI acquisition through cross-functional engagement. And my overall summary, this is from my reading of it, because I actually did read the whole thing and didn't just rely on ChatGPT. But my overall summary is that the policy is really, it's just about responsible and sensible procurement when it comes to AI products and services. But there since we're privacy experts, and that's what the topic of this podcast is, there was a very specific section that is titled "Protect Privacy."
Hey, I'm ready. What did it call for?
So it cites a prior OMB circular. I'll admit I didn't dive deep enough to find that. But it says that agencies shall establish policies and processes, including contractual terms and conditions that ensure compliance with privacy requirements in law and policy whenever agencies acquire an AI system or service, or an agency contractor uses an AI system or service that will create, collect, use, process, store, maintain, disseminate, disclose, or dispose of federal information containing personally identifiable information. So all of that to say, it requires, do your due diligence on privacy. There was also something in there about senior agency officials for privacy having early and ongoing involvement in agency acquisition processes, which is really, really important as a privacy and previous, cybersecurity person. If you're not involved in the early stages, it's really hard to, after the fact, come and, attach on some privacy provisions. If you're doing it from the beginning, it's a lot easier.
Incredibly hard, expensive, and not nearly as an effective use of time as being brought into the development life cycle for sure. But I mean, overall, there seems to be notable recognition to your point on the importance of privacy. What about that first OMB policy? What was that one about?
So I actually thought that this one, the other one, the first one was more interesting. So M-25-21. The subject line within this policy is accelerating federal use of AI through innovation, governance, and public trust.
Yeah, and surely listeners and myself would appreciate a summary since my brain is even still kind of spinning on the legal jargon and I'm relying on
Yeah.
my own little mind map there that I created for everyone. So what's the TLDR?
I'll go with a shorter summary. The summary of it was that this memo serves as a directive for federal agencies to efficiently and responsibly adopt AI technologies, focusing on internal strategies, governance, and public trust.
It sounds like then the first one was about procurement of AI and the second was about adoption. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate overview. Yeah, that's fair.
And so let me get another thing straight then. These are not a replacement then necessarily of Biden's administrative executive order after all, or is there more coming?
I think that there should be more. Every indication is that there will be more. The OMB and the other agencies that they're working with, they were given 180 days. So they have until July 22nd, I think is when that clock will run out. On February 25th, so what's that, about a month after the original directive was given, the Office of Science and Technology Policy, OSTP, issued a request for information, and they were soliciting, and this is a quote from it, input from interested public parties, including academia, industry groups, private sector organizations, state, local, and tribal governments, and others on actions that should be included in the AI action plan. And that request for information was open until March 15th, which has now passed.
Just passed. Dang, we should have submitted something, John.
We should. I actually have thought about that a few times. I really would be interested in,
You're right down the
participating.
street.
I know. Well, you don't have to be close. I would be interested in participating in an RFI for something like this at some point. I think that the first step is to get a better understanding of the standard structure and form of submissions. Like, you're not just going to write and say, "Hey guys, this is what I think." I'm sure there's a standard way of doing it. But I suspect that there's a lot of interest from the tech sector, advocacy groups, like it says, academia. There's all kinds of people who are going to try and influence policy like this.
Yeah, agreed. And we will have to keep an eye out for another opportunity to engage, it sounds like, after a little more research. But what is the status quo then? Do you have any idea?
Well, presumably federal agencies, whatever's left of them, because they're all being gutted these days, it seems, they're implementing the new guidance, those two memos that we talked about, that was issued by OMB. I mean, that was directives that they were given. So I'm guessing that they're doing that.
Yeah, and if the Biden executive order was rescinded, then what guidance are, federal agencies looking to when implementing these measures to accomplish the objectives set out in what's current?
Yeah, I think that there's a void in that area of providing guidance for responsible development of AI. The important parts of the executive order, they just went away when the order was rescinded. Right now, I think it's kind of the Wild West. Developers of AI systems, there's few constraints that I am aware of within the United States. And as far as I can tell, there are no federal agencies overseeing what is coming onto the market from AI developers.
Yeah, and just playing devil's advocate, though, should there be? Isn't it better for commerce that there be fewer barriers to American leadership in AI, to quote the executive order that rescinded the prior Biden approach?
I think that we have to put it into context because, when you read it like that, we're taking down barriers to business. It sounds good, but I think you have to put it into a context. So I would like to draw a comparison here. And the one that I thought of is that there was a time when drugs and medications were largely unregulated in this country.
Yeah, you just cited the Wild West. It makes me think of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
snake oil salesman outside of their horse and carriages, just slinging bottles.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think that really was a thing. And, back in the day, there was, my understanding from my research is that there was public outrage about dangerous products that made false claims, snake oil. And at the same time, there was also a lot of unsanitary practices in the food processing industry. Um, and actually, there was a very interesting Stuff You Should Know episode going back to 2015. Shout out to Josh and Chuck from Stuff You Should Know. So if you get a chance to look for that, yeah, take a listen.
Good compliment to this episode. You love shouting them out, and especially an episode that goes 10 years back. It's very memorable. So
I do, but maybe someday those podcasters will reciprocate and give us a shout out.
yes, a little privacy segment. Anyway, back to unregulated medicines in your example. Let's hear about that.
Yeah. So, because of that public outcry, the original Food and Drug Administration Act was passed in 1906. So, it goes back a minute. That established the Food and Drug Administration and gave them the regulatory oversight over both food and drugs, hence the Food and Drug Administration.
Yeah, and good stuff. But again, playing devil's advocate here, isn't this just another example of federal bureaucracy getting in the way?
You might think that. So I'd like to offer an example of a success story from the FDA. And I know, people from the FDA don't at me here. I know that there's been tons and tons of success at the FDA, but I just want to pick one story. And I'm sure everyone at the FDA is very familiar with this story. So for everyone else, in the early 1960s, there was a relatively new, my understanding, investigator working for the FDA at the time. Her name was Dr. Frances Oldham Kelsey. She was tasked with reviewing a new drug from Europe that wanted to break into the U.S. market. The purpose of the drug was to treat morning sickness in pregnant women.
Yeah, that's got to be hard. Haven't been through it, but I don't envy it. We need a solution for that.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a medical condition that was worth treating if it can be treated. Mm-hmm. At the time, the drug that was trying to be introduced into the U.S. market, it was already on the market in several countries and was actively being prescribed to pregnant women at the time, and it was actually showing to be effective in treating their morning sickness.
Okay, when so far?
Well, not so fast. So the company that was seeking approval, they pointed to the European market and saying, hey, we're already selling it there and it's working. And, they used that to try and accelerate the approval process. But Dr. Kelsey noted some anomalies in the data that raised some concerns for her about the safety of the drug. She then resisted pressure and declined to approve the drug. Well, that drug that I'm talking about here was thalidomide, which became famous after that. It resulted in over 10,000 babies worldwide being born with malformed or missing limbs and other severe birth defects. The highest numbers were in the United Kingdom and what was West Germany at the time.
Yeah, yikes. I mean, that sent chills down my spine and not good ones. So Dr. Kelsey that effectively prevented a catastrophe here in the United States.
She did. I mean, kudos to her for sure. I actually have a good friend who's a very well-respected microbiologist at the FDA today. I had lunch with him on Friday, I think, and I told him I was getting ready for this podcast, and we talked about Dr. Kelsey, and he recognized the significance of her work, and the fact that she stood up to pressures to approve the drug. He also pointed out to me that he was born around about that time in the early 1960s, and realizes that without her work, thalidomide might have actually been prescribed to his own mother, and he might have been personally affected by it.
Man, I mean, that brings it close to home for him, right?
Absolutely. And, so my point is that it's easy to see that a regulation is a barrier to advancement or innovation or commerce. But I suspect that every regulation that's out there, there are examples of real harms that happened, and are a reaction to prevent them from happening again.
A really, really great point and good comparison overall.
Yeah. So getting back to AI, because there was no AI in the 1960s, but in that realm, we don't have regulations yet for AI. And I think that's because the harms haven't happened. Like, it's generally a reactive process. But I think as a society, we are smarter than that, or we should be smarter. There are a lot of harms that are predictable and preventable. But I think that right now that there are no efforts underway to figure that out and prevent them.
Yeah. And you mentioned that we have yet to see the harms. Like, surely there have been examples so far that we've observed and we can use as a reference point. But I think your point is that the breadth or the scale of potential harms has not been observed and materialized a bit because we assume that requires the scale of implementation. But it's also about how it's rolled out, how carefully it's researched, trial and error, right? Like, it has to be gradual, it has to be concerted, and we need to know what we're using and how it works.
Yeah, agreed. And without regulation and guidance, I think that the development and adoption of AI, it's going to be done irresponsibly. It's going to be irresponsible, and it's going to focus on what the technologists can do rather than what they should do. And I think that the goal in this development, if you look at the companies that are working on it the most and the stock market and all of that, the goal is going to be to make money. They're going to want to be market leaders and drive up their stock prices, and it's not going to be to protect us or the consumers of the product.
Yes, it's, I mean, in our current kind of state of society, we have a lot of contradictory incentives from many very important stakeholders and parties that either create these technologies, deploy them, use them. Every single person involved, it's not a perfect solution out there, but we need to be making that effort. But back to the federal government talking about regulation and
Yeah.
making that effort. This is where you see a gap, or I'm interested to hear your take.
It is. I think that the main responsibility here should be Congress to pass, to draft and pass legislation to establish the right controls and safeguards. And that takes a while. The Congress doesn't act that quickly most of the time. In the interim, the Biden administration's executive order had a really balanced approach. And citing the summary that I had from AI about that executive order, it said it was to establish a broad national framework for AI development and use, emphasizing safety, civil rights, and innovation. It was balancing all of the right things. Let's do it. Let's innovate, but let's do it safely.
Yeah. So I guess a good takeaway perhaps is that we're waiting to see what the OMB comes up with for perhaps a new plan.
Agreed. Yeah. Like I said, February 20 or July 22nd, I'll be on the edge of my seat waiting for it.
Awesome. I'm glad we can expect an update from you when it comes out. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure. And when it comes to that, when it comes out, I'll likely do an initial overview and offer my opinion about it, just a raw opinion reading it, and then do a side by side comparison between the new plan and the Biden one that was rescinded, and see who got it right. We're going to get into some subjectivity there, but it's only fair to compare them.
Yeah, we purely from an academic perspective, though, we make it free and accessible to everyone listening and reading on our new Substack, which I'm going to go off script and kind of plug for a second. We now post written content. A lot of it is complementary to our published episodes. I think we might go off and capture some new current events or, our perspectives, our shower thoughts, if you will, giving us a space to put those in case y'all are interested. So that Substack domain is called the Pulse on Privacy. I'll plug that. I mean, I'll plug it everywhere, so you won't miss it. But in case you have up to this point, that's that. But should we put a pin in it here with that?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot here. So you want to feed the lawyers and do the,
Oh,
the
yes.
final
yes.
disclaimer?
I have one last thing to say. Please note that the information shared throughout this episode is that of our own and not in any way affiliated with our employers or other organizations. These episodes are produced in our own time and are based on our own research and professional opinions.
Thanks, Rachel.
Gonna make an effort to read that faster and faster every time. Just kidding. Thank you, John, and see you next time. Great research on this one.
Sure. Thanks. All right. See you. Bye.